name is Dallas Boudreau, and welcome to We Don't Talk Anymore, a podcast about friendship breakups. Have you ever had a friend you thought would be in your life forever, but as time passed and you grew, they didn't grow with you? Today, I want to tell you about my friendship with Sydney. As always, I'm sharing this story from my own perspective, how I experienced it, how I remember it, and what it means to me. I've changed names and identifying details to protect privacy, and my intention isn't to shame or criticize anyone, but to process and reflect on something that shaped me. Quick content note before we begin. This episode contains references to recreational drug use. Please take care while listening. Me and Sydney became very fast friends in college. I believe we met towards the middle of my freshman year, and I think it was her sophomore year. And we were both in the theater department together. We just clicked instantly. We were part of a big friend group at the time. And in between freshman and sophomore year, I took a break to go do the Disney College program. And within that break, she was the only person in that group of friends that stayed in contact with me. After I came back from the program, our friend group had kind of fallen apart. And me and her didn't talk for a while after I came back, but once we reconnected, we were pretty much inseparable. I was there for her through a really horrible breakup that she was going through. She was there for me when I was going through heartbreak, and I was just really insecure for, honestly, a lot of my life. I was insecure as a child. I was insecure in high school. I was insecure throughout almost all of college, and she just had this way of making you feel special. Like, she was a really great hype woman. I always felt like she was prettier than me, and I would always vent to her about things I was insecure about, but she never made me feel those things. Like, I felt that way, and she would always bring me up, I feel, especially during the beginning and middle of our friendship. I always felt like I could turn to her about anything. I never felt like I would be judged for any diabolical thought that I had. She just really made me feel seen and heard, and she was kind of magnetic. We became very codependent, maybe. I was already a very codependent person, especially in high school and college. And when I became best friends with someone, we were doing everything together. So me and Sydney really, really clicked. We threw parties all the time together. We went to parties all the time together. We had a pretty chaotic lifestyle. We definitely drank and smoked a lot throughout college. And she was just one of those friends that I felt like was down for anything with me. And me the same for her. I actually feel like a lot of our, especially early friendship, I really looked up to her. She was only a few years older than me, but we just really connected on a lot of things. We had a lot of parallel trauma that we bonded over, and eventually we ended up moving in together, and then it was perfect. It was actually one of the only living situations with friends that ended up okay. It just felt like low effort friendship because we were just always kind of together. There was never really any question about it. So me and Sydney met kind of at the height of my party phase, and we were the kind of girls that were down for anything. I was doing a lot of ecstasy. I was smoking. I was doing acid. I was deep into my mental illness at this point, and not coping well, just partying all the time instead. So she was one of those friends that I was constantly out partying with. I loved Sydney. I looked up to her. She was kind of like a role model to me. We were both theater majors. We both wanted to pursue acting. And for a long time, I really thought that I wanted to do Broadway, move to New York or Chicago or something like that. But it was Sydney actually that convinced me that moving to LA was the move, and film acting was where it was at. As time went on, we kind of started hanging out with people who were doing harder drugs, and we were doing them too. And I feel like we just kind of got in this rhythm of nonstop partying my junior year and her senior year of college. During that year, me and her really started to talk about the future. And she had already decided that she was moving to LA. She graduated a year before me, and the plan was that I move up with her after I graduate and we take on LA together. We would talk on the phone at least once a week. We would call each other randomly. She was one of those people that, like, I didn't care if she called me randomly. I was picking up. We were going to talk for at least an hour. So we stayed in touch very well throughout the year that she was in LA. That year was a really hard year for me. And when I finally reached my breaking point of like, I need a change in my life, I think is when our friendship really took a turn. I had been, especially since Sydney had left to go to LA, I had been doing a lot more drugs. I had been hanging out with this group of people, and it seemed like that was kind of all we wanted to do. And I'm not saying that it was just them. It was me too. I gave in to that because it was kind of the only thing that made me feel alive. I was doing a lot of drugs and hooking up with a lot of random people. And I finally hit a point where I was like, this is really bad for my health. This is actually maybe going to kill me one day. So I deleted Tinder and I decided to stop doing drugs. It was harder for me to give up weed because I had been doing that for such a long time and it became such a crutch for me. But I really wanted to feel like I could be the person that I wanted to be. And I knew that at that point in my life especially, there was no way I was going to be able to do that if I was still smoking weed. So I stopped smoking and totally cut off dating and hooking up. But I kept Bumble. And as one last-ditch effort, I ended up reaching out to someone who is now my husband. So obviously he was different. It was so weird because when me and him met, I was so fucking over it. I was like, God, I can't do this anymore. I was so lackluster when I was messaging him on Bumble. I don't know how he kept up a conversation with me because I was like, no punctuation, no emojis, nothing, like dry as fuck. He started talking to me about theater and he started actually having a conversation with me. And I was like, oh shit, this is different maybe. And it was, clearly. So as time went on and I started getting to know my now husband and things started to get more serious, I was telling Sydney about it. And at first, she seemed really supportive. She seemed happy for me, especially from a distance. And actually, at some point, my husband ended up having to go to LA for a work trip. And I suggested that they meet up. And they did. She said it went great. He said it went great. There was no hint of concern in my eyes from anything. On our first date, I was like, I don't know what I'm looking for, but I'm moving to LA at the end of the year. So take with that what you will. And he said not to be too forward, but if this works out, I can work from anywhere. I work remotely. And that was, different, obviously, someone who knew what they want. So fast forward, we've been dating like 6 months. We're still going very strong. And now the plan is that me and him are going to move to LA. And me and Sydney talked all throughout this. She was very on board with it. And I even suggested to her that we move in with her to make rent cheaper for all of us. And she agreed. At the time, Sydney was living with someone that I actually knew from high school. Let's call him Cameron. He and her were the same age and moved to LA around the same time. They ended up rooming together, and she would constantly call and text me complaining about how bad it was living with him. So I was really there for her through that. And when the chance came for us to move in together, and when I brought up me and my partner moving in together, it really felt like a win-win-win for all of us. So we moved. The move was stressful in and of itself, but everything seemed fine. Me and Sydney seemed okay. But as time went on, she was pretty upset about me not wanting to party with her anymore. There were multiple instances where we went out and she was like peer pressuring me to do coke or peer pressuring me to smoke, even though I had told her my experiences and how my mental health was not doing well when I was doing those substances. And she didn't care. She just didn't want to feel, I think, like I was judging her, even though I would never, like I was not judging at all. But I personally was just not in the right headspace to be doing any of that anymore. And she really didn't like that. I remember us having a conversation where she said she felt like she was being judged for like drinking wine in our living room. And I was like, I don't know what to do to make you not feel that way. Like, I felt like she was really projecting that onto my partner because he didn't drink as much as me and her did. At this time, I was still drinking and I was still occasionally smoking, but kind of trying to pare back. And I never felt like he judged us when we were drinking, and he never felt any type of way. Honestly, I feel like she was just projecting it onto him because he has a rough RBF, and people who don't know him just assume all sorts of things about him that aren't true. It was like she wanted me to agree with her about him judging us or something, and I didn't. A lot of times things were fine when it was just me and her, but when my partner was in the mix, the dynamic just felt really off. And if she was drinking but I wasn't, she would make me feel weird about it. Like, not wanting to drink in the moment meant that I was judging her, which again wasn't true because at this time I was still drinking. So there were a lot of little things that kind of started to build up. I wanted to settle down. I wanted to get my mental health right. I wanted to get healthy. And it felt like at every turn, she was pissed off about me wanting to do that because I wasn't her quote unquote fun party friend anymore. Looking back on our friendship, I do feel like I just followed her lead a lot. And I think it's partly because I looked up to her so much. She had this way of making you feel like you were so cool, especially if you were on her side. Like, if you were with her, it was you and her against the world. It was so easy to get wrapped up in feeling like, damn, we're so cool. Like, you're my ride or die bitch. Like, I would do anything for you. And it just like wasn't real. At least it wasn't real if you weren't doing something that she agreed with, or if you were doing something she didn't like, or if you weren't partaking in whatever she was partaking with. When we moved to LA, I felt like a push and pull between who I was trying to be and who I used to be. I feel like I kept like oscillating between who I was now in my life with my partner and who I was in my life when I was best friends with Sydney, and that was it. And there was no partner in mind, but my priorities were changing. I was with this person and planned to be with this person forever. And I felt like my lifestyle was changing, but I didn't know how to change with it. I was struggling a lot with feeling like I was still fun, even if I wasn't doing drugs or partying as much. And it felt kind of impossible to appease both sides. At first, I really didn't feel like there was a lot of tension between my partner and Sydney, but as time went on, it became more and more obvious that she just didn't fucking like him. And it put me in a very weird, uncomfortable position where we're all living together. And it's clear there's tension there, but it's not really clear why. To me at the time, it wasn't clear why. When we moved to LA, she was going to do some legwork while she was in LA before me. And then I would come to LA and she would help me kind of reach where she was at in our career. So she was like, I'll figure out where to get headshots. You know, I'll find some classes that are good and we'll do this together. And when we got there and I was ready, I had savings. I had a lot of savings that I had saved up to spend on new headshots, to find classes. When I got there and I was ready to do stuff, she had a different tune. And I think it's because she hadn't really done a lot her first year. And I'm not saying you move to LA immediately, you're going to book stuff. That's not what I'm saying. She moved there and then just was partying for like a year and a half. And when I got there and I was like, girl, I'm ready. I'm ready for my career to start. I'm ready to start working hard towards something. She literally told me, you just need to like fuck around for 2 years and then you can pursue acting. And I was like, what? Huh? that's not the plan. I don't want to fuck around for 2 years. That's not what I want to do. That was one of the first kind of weird red flags right immediately after we moved. But I kind of looked past it because I felt like, okay, well, we've been through a lot, and that's valid for her to want to do that, but that doesn't mean that I want to. But it really felt like anytime I tried to talk about industry stuff, she was unwilling to. And when I look back, I feel like she had that like scarcity mindset of like, you're my competition and I can't let you get ahead of me. She was like that a lot, which to me is ridiculous because I'm of the mind that there's enough room at the top for everyone. But it felt like she was trying to keep me from pursuing because she wasn't pursuing, and she didn't want me to like get ahead of her or something. I don't know. It was jarring to have such a buildup of, it's gonna be us against LA, and then get there and have her be like, no, don't worry. You don't need to worry about it, actually. So after a few months of living in LA and like endless job hunting, I ended up finally getting a job where Sydney worked. And at first it was chill. It was like, oh, great, I'm working with my friends. This is very chill. Love it. Cameron actually worked there too. And despite Sydney and him not living together anymore, they were still really good friends. So we all three worked together. I remember there was a Super Bowl party that we were invited to. This is kind of when I feel like the beginning of the end truly started. There was a lot of build up into it, but this I can kind of pinpoint as like an inciting moment where I started to see that something wasn't right anymore in our friendship. So we were invited by a coworker to a Super Bowl party at his house. And we went. My partner came with me, and me and Sydney and Cameron and my partner all met up there. At this point, I was still drinking and smoking, but I was like stuck in that weird phase of wanting to be fun and feeling like I wasn't fun if I wasn't drinking or smoking, but also knowing that it wasn't good for me. Like, I was getting horrible panic attacks every time I smoked, but I just like couldn't stop, I guess. It was really hard for me to stop, especially if I was around people who were doing it and they were offering it. I didn't want to feel like I was lame. So I was just kind of stuck in the thick of that struggle. The only person I knew in LA really well was Sydney. And Cameron, I knew pretty well because we had known each other since high school. Like, we were friends in high school, but a lot of time had passed since then. So Sydney was the closest person that I had at the time in LA. We get to this party. It's okay. After a while, we decide that we're going to leave and go home. Cameron and Sydney were like, this party's lame. There's another party we want to go to, but we want to hang out with you guys after. Me and my partner were like, cool. Why don't we get some edibles and then we can go back to our place and play Mario Kart or something? And they were like, yeah, do that. Yeah. Me and my partner go buy some edibles, go back to our apartment, and we wait for them. And they took a while because they were stopping at another party. And me and him decided, all right, well, we'll just take one each and vibe and wait for them. So eventually they come into the apartment, and immediately they were like, ooh, gummies, and like ran up to them, took them, and then immediately went into Sydney's room. And me and my partner looked at each other and we were like, what was that? That was weird, right? Yeah, that was weird. They come back out after a little bit and they're like, okay, I think we're going to go to this rooftop bar, but we'll see you guys later. And I was like, what? So you're just going to take these edibles and dip? I think I literally quote said that. They got so like defensive and they ended up leaving, which is, whatever. But me and my partner afterwards were like, that was so weird. Like, that was not cool. We wouldn't have gone out and bought these if we knew that they were going to just go somewhere else immediately. It felt like they were using us as like a vehicle to get free weed, which just obviously didn't feel great. And then their reactions were just, it felt like I was being aggressive when I know that I wasn't. So I felt so awkward and uncomfortable the whole rest of the night. I don't even think Sydney came home that night. And then the next day, after she came home from work, I asked her if we could talk. And so we did. And the conversation did not go how I thought it was going to go at all. I told her how I was feeling, how it felt kind of like they were taking advantage of us. And she basically told me that it didn't sound like me saying that. She said that it sounded like it was my partner saying that, and that it didn't feel like me, and that weed was meant to be shared. And I thought you knew that. And it just felt like my partner was manipulating me into seeing things his way. I ended up crying because I felt crazy. I was like, wait, is he manipulating me? Is that true? Like, weed is meant to be shared. Of course it is. Maybe she's right. And looking back now, I can see that she knew everything about my past. She knew everything about my ex, who was extremely manipulative. And I feel like she kind of used that to manipulate me into not continuing to call her out on her weird behavior, to make it so that both of us were victims of my partner. This completely wrecked me and my partner's relationship for a really long time. I'm not gonna lie. I had known her so much longer than I had known him. We had been friends for 6 years. I had been dating him for maybe a year, little over a year. And it really turned my entire world upside down. I started to be really resentful of him. I started trying to appease her more. I started to feel even more in the middle, and I was just unhappy on both ends. I felt like I was walking on eggshells with her, and I felt like I was constantly having to be defensive with him. And when we were all together, it felt like there was just this tension simmering underneath. It was a really hard and confusing time for me because I feel like I was in such a vulnerable state. I had no other friends that I trusted, that I really knew at the time, except for my partner and her. And when my best friend of 6 years is telling me that my new-ish partner is manipulating me and turning me into someone I'm not, I was partial to believe her. And this is kind of, like I said, when things really took a turn for the worse. I ended up crying to her and apologizing to her and really questioning my entire relationship. Who was this person that I moved across the country with? Did I even want to be with him anymore? She planted that seed and it just sprouted and grew out of control. There was another incident after the Super Bowl party that really made me feel uncomfortable. Like I said, we all worked in the same place, and there were some jokes that were made that obviously weren't appropriate, but when it's your friends, you're like, whatever. It doesn't matter. I'm with my friends. But they made some jokes about one of their coworkers. They threw it around at work, so I thought that coworker was in on it. I ended up slipping that joke to the coworker, and it was a huge thing because that coworker had no idea that they were the butt of a kind of joke like that. And I felt like shit because I thought that they were in on it. HR had to get involved. It was a whole thing. Sydney ended up sitting me down at home and being extremely condescending and telling me, when we're at work, there are certain things that we just shouldn't talk about. And that was really uncomfortable for me and Cameron to have to deal with. So manipulative when I think about it. Another red flag that popped out to me was when COVID hit. We all lived in LA when COVID happened. It was extremely terrifying. The city was in complete lockdown for a long time, and we're from Tennessee. So Sydney ended up moving back in with her mom. And while she was gone, a lot of her conservative parents' opinions, I think, came through. I literally have a text from her that I'm actually going to pull up and read. I saved the screenshot because it disturbed me so much and I needed evidence that I was not crazy. So we were talking about COVID, and she was currently in Tennessee with her parents, and me and my partner were still in LA. I was extremely cautious. I have an autoimmune disease, so I was pretty scared about getting COVID. And Sydney said, "My thing is, I'm honestly over it. All the numbers are inaccurate and sources keep posting shit that they haven't even confirmed. This is getting way out of control. I don't want anyone to die, but I also don't want to crash our economy." And I typed out this response, but I didn't send it. I was like, girl, people's lives are a little more important than the economy. And I didn't send it, and I wish I had, but I was so scared. I was so scared of like angering her because I could see how fucking mean she was to people that were on her bad side. She is one of those friends who talked shit about literally every other friend she had, and I was naive enough to believe that it was different for me. So PSA, if you have a friend who talks shit about literally every single other friend they have to you, know that they are talking shit about you to all of their other friends. They are. And just to be clear, there is a difference between venting about a friend and a situation that you're going through and just talking shit to be mean. Sydney was not venting. She was talking shit about literally everyone. People that she would be like, oh, they're my best friend. People like Cameron, she used to live with him and would talk so much shit about him. And then to his face would act like they were best friends. And if someone does that about every single friend that they have, they're probably doing it to you too. So all of these events that happened like really culminated into me realizing that me and her had extremely different morals and extremely different values. I had really started growing and turning into a different person, and my lifestyle was completely different than hers at this point. And it was just not meshing well at all. Eventually, we moved out of our apartment with her and moved somewhere else. She moved to the Valley. Me and my partner moved to Culver City. And it was good. I'm going to be so honest. COVID really made me and my partner come together in a way that like we didn't even think possible. It made our relationship so much deeper and stronger because we finally had space away from Sydney to talk about all that had happened. Me and him had really had this giant wedge between us forced by Sydney. And I remember calling my mom, being so distraught and confused and feeling like I had no idea if I really wanted to keep being with my partner at the time. And my mom clocked it so quick. She was like, has someone told you these things? Because they just seem so out of nowhere. And yeah, it was Sydney. She really wanted to drive me and him apart so that it would bring me and her closer together, I think. And I think she thought that it would make me turn back into who I was before me and him met. Turn back into the kind of person who just followed her lead and wanted to take part in that really chaotic lifestyle, when that just was not who I wanted to be anymore and wasn't who I was becoming. I can definitely have empathy for her. It might not seem like it, but I do. I can see that she was desperately trying to cling to a version of me that didn't exist anymore. Although I will admit it is hard to have empathy for someone who blatantly tries to manipulate you into thinking, one, that you're not someone who you know you are, and two, into thinking that someone who deeply loves and cares about you is manipulative and controlling. That was a lot of the things that she would put into my head, that because he was concerned about where I was going and who I was going to be with, because he wanted me to be safe in a city that we didn't know with people that we didn't know, that he was controlling and manipulative. And that wasn't the case at all. Thankfully, she left during COVID and me and him were able to really talk about it. And I felt so obsessively upset about the whole thing. I felt like I wanted to talk to her about it, but I had no idea how to talk to her about it. I didn't want to text about it. I didn't want to FaceTime or call about it. I wanted it to be in person. And she was in and out of Tennessee multiple times during COVID. So it was hard. I just felt like I had to pretend to still be buddy-buddy with her and get the solace that I got from being alone with my partner and not having her there. But anytime she came back, I felt so fucking anxious and worried and scared. I was scared to disappoint her. I was scared to stop being friends with her. I think because of how codependent we had been in a lot of our friendship, I was scared to know what exactly life would be like without her. But as we started drifting apart and we started talking less, I felt relief. I felt like a weight was lifted off of my shoulders. And that was a sign to me that this was the right thing. So when we moved out of our apartment, me and her were still friends, but it was much more surface level. I didn't feel comfortable talking to her about anything deeper anymore. And we hung out a couple times. And I think that was the last time that I actually saw her in person. She moved back to Tennessee a little bit actually before we decided to move. And honestly, she was the one who put the idea in my head to move back home. The film industry was completely shut down during COVID for a long time. And the Southeast was really booming. Plus, during COVID, I really realized how much I missed my family and how much I missed being around them. And obviously, after the loss of my sister, being close to my family is super important to me. So she moved back to Tennessee, and then we moved, I think, a couple months later. And I remember a week or two before we moved, she sent me a Marco Polo talking about how the spa that I used to work at was hiring. And she knew that I was going to go back there because I was pretty much guaranteed a job there. She was like, oh, should I apply? Is this a sign? And I actually sent her a video back saying, hey, I actually don't know if that's a great idea. It didn't really work well when we worked together the first time. I think it might be better if we don't, if that's okay. And she sent a very passive-aggressive video basically saying, well, yeah, but I mean, I was your manager and I felt like it might be different if, one of us wasn't a manager, but okay, no, that's fine. And I think I sent her one last video basically just being like, great, I'm happy that you're okay with that. Thought you would be mad. I'm happy you're not mad, and cool. And we quite literally haven't talked since. This was back in 2020. I, for the first week, was nervous when she didn't respond. I was like, God, what's she going to say? I feel like she's going to say something shitty and turn it around again. But she just didn't say anything. And it genuinely felt like a weight was lifted off of my shoulders. I was obsessing over her feelings. Oh, I didn't want to hurt her feelings. I didn't want to make her angry. I didn't want to rock the boat because I cared about our friendship a lot. And I wanted her to be the kind of friend that I felt like I could bring something to. But I think a lot of my anxiety came from when I did bring that problem to her, she immediately turned it back around on me and made me feel like I was crazy. Made me feel like I was the one in the wrong. Made me feel like my partner was someone I didn't know because she didn't want to be called out. It's been, 5 years since then, and we still haven't talked. I restricted her on Instagram because I just didn't want to see, and obviously I unfollowed her, and she obviously unfollowed me, and that's it. I feel like, honestly, sometimes letting go of someone that you know is toxic or someone that's causing you so much anxiety and pain or distress, it can really be the first deep breath you take in years. And that's what it felt like for me. It felt like I was taking a deep breath for the first time in years. I felt like I was finally able to truly change and grow in the way that I wanted to without feeling guilty for leaving her behind or leaving our lifestyle behind. I feel like this friendship and this friendship breakup really taught me about trusting myself and setting healthy boundaries in friendships. And that's something I continue to learn as time goes on and have continually gotten better about as I've gotten older, especially. I think that as time went on, we both were just changing in ways that were not congruent with each other anymore. And I was like really wanting to leave behind that more chaotic party phase of my life. I just don't think that she was ready for that. And it felt like she had to drag me down to her level because she was upset that I was kind of moving on in life. I think if you have a friend who's pressuring you to do anything that you don't want to do, you should tell them to fuck off. And if a friend isn't willing to have a rational conversation with you, isn't able to take any accountability, is constantly twisting things on you to make you feel bad when you call them out, know that that's not a coincidence. It's textbook manipulation. And I wish I would have trusted my gut because I feel like in that moment, I was so caught between, do I believe her or do I believe my partner? And I wanted to believe her. And she took advantage of that, obviously. In the long run, I'm thankful for our friendship. Before we moved to LA, she was really there for me for a lot, and I was really there for her for a lot. We went through a lot together in college, and some of those times are really fun to look back on. But I think it's normal to lose friends when you start to kind of change your lifestyle. I think it's normal to lose friends when those friends aren't willing to watch you grow without taking it personally. If one of your friends hates who you're becoming, it's probably not because who you're becoming is bad, but because who you're becoming isn't convenient for them anymore. Especially if the way you're growing is by doing hard work on yourself and like taking stock of your morals and values and readjusting in accordance to those. I know that this one was a little bit different than my first 2 episodes. I feel really strongly about this friendship breakup because it was such a kind of convoluted and twisted story. And it's one of those where you don't really get any closure. And I feel like a lot of times in friendship breakups, you don't get any closure. But I am of the mind that closure is something that you can really only truly give yourself. So I will say this. I feel like this is one of the friendship breakups that I've had where I didn't need any closure. I didn't care to check in on her. I didn't care to reach out because I was so honestly thankful that the whole thing was over. I was so stressed out for months on end thinking about how she would retaliate, how she would take anything that I had to say, any feedback. I was filled with a lot of fear and anxiety and had let her have a lot of power over me. And when we stopped talking and I didn't have to have a giant explosive confrontation, it was such a relief. It was such a relief that I have quite literally never looked back. I'm very thankful for our friendship in college. I think she was the kind of friend that I really needed. She was a really good hype woman. She really made you feel special. She made you feel like you were cool because you were friends with her, which I think is what I needed when I was younger and more insecure. But as I got older and became more sure of myself, it just all fell apart. I think she changed a lot when she moved to LA into someone that I don't know if she was like that before or if it was someone that she turned into, but it was someone that our values and morals didn't align anymore. This episode, I really wanted to talk about a little more complex story because I know that there's so much that goes into friendship breakups. Like there's some that are cut and dry, but a lot of times they're not. And there's a lot of weird nuances and weird situations that go on during them. So I hope me sharing my story is helpful for any of you to maybe even just spot someone in your life who may be trying to manipulate you or maybe trying to bring you down to their level because you're growing in a different direction. If anyone has read The Artist's Way, I recently did it. And chapter 2, I believe, talks about crazy makers. And crazy makers are the people in your lives that are constantly in the middle of and causing drama and thrive on it. And Sydney was one of those people. And if you have someone in your life who is constantly talking shit about everyone, there's always someone they have a problem with, there's always something they have confrontation about or with or on or whatever, then you need to evaluate what role they play in your life and how close you actually want them in your life if you do not want drama in your life. Me and Sydney stopped being friends, and it was one of the best decisions of my life. Me and my partner got so much closer. I learned to trust myself more, to not take some of my friends' thoughts and opinions as like law. And I started to learn how to set really healthy boundaries with my friends. So if you're dealing with someone like this or have dealt with them in the past, I see you and I'd love to hear your story. If you are ready and willing to share, please feel free to email me at wedon'ttalkpod@gmail.com. You can follow me on Instagram at Dallyboo. And if you're interested in being on the show or just submitting your story, I would love that. Please feel free to reach out. I am so excited to share all these stories with you. I feel like it not only helps me kind of process the things that I've been through and talk about them, but I feel like it hopefully has the capacity to help other people who've been through similar situations and really see that, oh my God, this is a universal experience. Or wow, I'm not the only one. Like if I can make someone feel not alone, then that's everything. So thank you guys so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.